I'm here with Mike Jackson, the CEO of the PPS Group. Mike spoke earlier this afternoon around advice and the value proposition that advisors have to offer. Mike, you made the point that South African consumers, by and large, are not used to paying for advice and really expect it to be free. Why should they be paying for advice?
Look, to some extent, consumers are used to paying for their doctor or their dentist. So they do have some experience of paying for advice, but in financial services, they've had no experience of paying for advice. So there the advice has been built into the cost of the product. So we have to decide, are we going to take that cost out of the product and charge for it separately, or maybe leave it in the product? And perhaps in the lower end of the market where people can't afford an explicit fee or an explicit advice charge, maybe we should leave some advice component built into the actual product itself.
Yeah, you make the point that some people can't afford advice, of course, which is the major problem in South Africa. And in a world where they would have to pay for that, well, at the moment they're not compelled to save. And if commission structures were taken away from advisors, there might be less of a drive to get those individuals to save. And essentially what we have in South Africa is a savings crisis, really. What do you think is a solution or the solution to that crisis?
You know, in other countries like Australia and Singapore, what they've done is they have a national savings scheme and it's compulsory. So from the very first paycheck that you get, a certain percentage has to go into that scheme and there's no choice there. So that becomes a political will issue, that if you really want people to save, then you're going to have to make it compulsory. Then, of course, you have to provide some degree of advice to enable them to choose among product suppliers. But the type of advice varies. If you don't have compulsion and you don't have commission, there's a very high likelihood that a lot of South Africans will save a lot less than they saved in the past.
Which is certainly a challenge, I think, facing sort of the country as well as the financial services industry. Another challenge that you earmarked, particularly in South Africa, is the problem of churn of financial advisors and representatives. What is the effect of that, and is the regulator going to look at that?
Look, the industry is very competitive and distribution is critical. So if you've got good advisors, you'll find other companies are always wanting to poach them. The difficulty is when they poach the advisor, they often have to pay an upfront fee for that. Now, the quid pro quo is they want that advisor to move his business. So now when the advisor goes from company A to B, you find that advisor now moves all the business to his new company. Not because it's right for the client, but because it's an obligation that he has to justify his upfront payment. Then 3 or 4 years later, because of competition, another company can offer him more money to go there. So the risk is that he then churns his book of business to yet another company. So the regulator is looking at not only the issue of churning of business, but the churning of advisors as well. Because if the advisors move, the business tends to move with them.